Welcome back to our third deep dive in this 21-part series.
Yeah, it is really great to be back. We have a lot of ground to cover today.
We really do. So we are exploring the IT theological framework of the book, The Last Finding. And our mission today is to execute what the text calls a time rollback protocol.
Right, we are taking things all the way back to the 4th century.
Exactly. We're going to audit a massive systemic hack. Because today we're diving into Chapter 3, which is aptly titled The Beginning of the Detour.
That is such a great title for what actually happened.
It really is. So our goal today is to look at how a perfect, totally decentralized network was completely hijacked. And not by destroying the code, mind you, but by trapping the end users in this, centralized simulation.
Yeah, which connects right back to what we talked about last time.
Right. If you joined us on our last deep dives covering Chapter 2, we verified what the text calls the armored code.
The flawless preservation of the original source code.
Exactly. We looked at the mathematical and historical evidence proving that the original source code of creation was, perfectly preserved. It is mathematically unhackable.
Which is an incredible claim, but the data backs it up.
It does. But that immediately begs this massive question for you, the listener. If the original source code is so bulletproof, why does the modern operating system running it?
What we would typically call institutional religion.
Right. Why does it seem so incredibly buggy?
Yeah, it's a glaring contradiction.
It really is. So to answer that, I want you to imagine for a second the most ruthless, monopolistic tech corporation on the planet.
Okay, I can picture a few.
Right. They dominate the market, they control the infrastructure, and they just absolutely crush their competition.
Standard monopoly behavior.
Exactly. But then this tiny open source startup appears out of nowhere. And the monopoly tries everything to destroy them.
Because they're a threat.
A huge threat. So they launch massive cyber attacks, they try to delete their servers, they try to bankrupt them, but nothing works.
It just makes them stronger.
Yeah. In fact, every time the monopoly attacks, the startup's code just replicates faster. It goes completely viral.
I love this analogy.
So what does the giant corporation do when brute force completely fails? They don't keep fighting.
No,
They
pivot.
They buy the startup, they absorb them entirely, they move the rebel coders into a shiny corporate headquarters, change the terms of service, and suddenly that disruptive, world-changing software is just another bloated app pre-installed on the monopoly's operating system.
It's the ultimate neutralization strategy. You don't eliminate the disruption, you domesticate it.
Yes, you assimilate it.
You bring it into your own closed ecosystem. And what's fascinating here is how the last finding frames this specific historical event.
The 4th century shift.
Exactly. The moment the Roman Empire embraced the early believers, the text doesn't treat this as some triumphant religious conversion.
Not at all.
It treats it as a hostile corporate takeover. And to really grasp the mechanics of this, we have to look at the first 300 years of this movement through a strict cybersecurity lens.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because for 3 centuries, the Roman Empire utilized a literal brute force attack.
And we are not talking about, mild censorship here.
No, not at all. We are talking about severe physical trauma.
Absolutely.
They used martyrdom, gladiatorial arenas, and just extreme persecution to try and delete the network.
They were trying to physically wipe the users off the map.
Right, they were deleting the hosts.
Yeah.
And that takes an unimaginable psychological toll on a community.
Oh, it was a horrific era for the users, without a doubt. But from a purely structural standpoint, the audit points out a critical flaw in Rome's suppression strategy.
They misunderstood the architecture.
Completely. The empire was treating the early church like a centralized server farm.
Oh, okay.
They assumed that if they smashed enough hardware, killed enough leaders, the whole system would just go dark.
That's not how it was built.
No. The early believers were operating as a highly resilient P2P network, peer-to-peer.
Like early file sharing networks or modern decentralized blockchain ledgers.
Exactly like that. In a classic P2P network, there is no central server to unplug.
Because everyone is connected.
Right. Every single node, every single user connects directly to the others. And more importantly, directly to the creator core.
Wow.
It is a completely horizontal, flat architecture. There is literally no single point of failure.
So when the empire sent soldiers to destroy a node in Antioch or a node in Rome, the global network didn't go down.
It barely even blinked.
Because it was totally decentralized. Destroying one host only caused the source code to replicate exponentially across the rest of the system.
Yeah, the data just rerouted.
I mean, historically, we see that persecution just scattered the believers, which inadvertently acted like a viral marketing campaign.
That is exactly what it was.
The code just spread to new territories.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Roman emperor at the time, Constantine, he eventually realizes this.
He sees the data.
Right. He sees that the brute force method is failing catastrophically. The more nodes they delete, the more the network scales.
Backfiring.
Totally backfiring. So Constantine pivots. He initiates what the text diagnoses as a system envelope.
A system envelope. Okay, so he wraps them up.
He encapsulates the movement, yeah. Instead of trying to delete the software, which he now knows is mathematically impossible, he wraps the entire disruptive startup within the massive pre-existing architecture of the Roman state.
He brings them in-house.
Yes, he
Yeah.
legalizes it, brings it in-house, and makes it the official software of the empire.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this.
Sure.
Because history books usually sell the Edict of Milan in 313 AD,
Yeah.
which is the moment Christianity was legalized, as this massive, triumphant victory for freedom.
That is the standard narrative, yeah.
Like, the persecution stopped, people didn't have to hide in fear of being fed to lions anymore.
Which is undeniably a good thing.
Right. But this text treats surviving that era as a critical system vulnerability.
It does.
It's exactly like that open source app I mentioned earlier, throwing a massive party to celebrate that it just got bought out by the biggest, most controlling monopoly on the planet.
And they didn't win?
No, they didn't win. They just got assimilated into the very matrix they were supposedly disrupting.
It's a profound shift.
Right.
The relief from physical violence was obviously a welcome change for those users. Nobody wants to be persecuted.
Of course not.
But structurally, the Roman Empire didn't change its fundamental control mechanics.
It just changed its target acquisition.
Exactly. It simply acquired a massive new database of highly dedicated, passionate users. But the problem for the empire was that you cannot effectively control a P2P network if people are maintaining direct encrypted connections in the privacy of their own homes.
Right, because if I'm just booting up the source code in my dining room with 10 friends, the empire can't monitor our data flow.
They are completely blind to it.
They can't inject their own ads or, control the algorithm.
Which means the empire had to fundamentally change the hardware and the routing.
Okay.
The text calls this phase the network migration.
Network migration.
And this is where the physical environment of the users completely transforms.
Well, so.
Well, for 300 years, the interface was largely invisible. People met in intimate spaces, houses, catacombs, riverbanks.
Very low-key.
They shared meals. The processing load required to run the network was incredibly light, and the connection speed to the creator core was instantaneous.
Because there was no middleman.
Exactly.
But the empire requires visibility. It requires control.
Always.
So they forced a migration from those private P2P living rooms to massive state hardware.
The imperial basilicas.
Right. They moved the users into these huge basilicas. And according to the audit in Chapter 3, this wasn't just like an upgraded real estate.
Well, not at all.
It was a fundamental change in how data flowed. By moving into the state hardware, the users were forced to trade their spiritual autonomy for shared bandwidth.
That is the crucial, tragic trade-off of the Detour. Think about the original P2P design of the source code.
Okay.
Leaders were explicitly designated as support nodes.
Support nodes, not bosses.
Exactly. Their only technical function was to serve the other terminals, to help maintain a clean, direct line of communication between the individual host and the creator core.
So they were facilitators.
Yes. They were washing feet, practically speaking, not acting as gatekeepers.
But the Roman Empire doesn't do horizontal management.
No, they really don't.
They are an empire. They need hierarchy, ranks, permissions, command structures to function.
So the state introduced an administrative hierarchy. They essentially turned those humble support nodes into sysadmins.
System administrators.
Right. Sysadmins who now possess the power to control, throttle, and monitor the entire network.
I want you, the listener, to really think about this from the user's perspective back then.
Yeah.
You go from having a direct, encrypted personal line to the creator core right there in your neighbor's living room,
Yeah.
to suddenly having to route all your personal data through the Roman Empire's official internet service provider.
It's a massive downgrade.
It really is.
Yeah.
But why would anyone voluntarily hand over their administrative privileges to a centralized authority? It seems like such an obvious downgrade in user experience.
It does, and it raises an important question about user psychology.
Okay.
Because honestly, it takes a lot of personal responsibility to maintain a direct connection. Outsourcing your spiritual IT needs to a professional is, in some ways, much easier.
Oh, sure. You just show up and let them handle it.
Right. But the text also answers this by diagnosing a deliberate systemic strategy,
What's that?
the introduction of bloatware.
Oh, man. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It is wild.
Think about buying a brand new, top-of-the-line smartphone today.
Okay, I'm with you.
The hardware is beautiful, the screen is crisp, but when you turn it on, you realize your cellular carrier has pre-installed 10 gigabytes of flashy, undeletable apps.
Oh, the worst.
Right. You've got weather widgets you didn't ask for, trial games popping up with notifications, carrier billing software constantly running in the background.
It's eating up your memory.
Exactly. It instantly drains your battery, your CPU is running hot, and the phone is lagging just trying to open a basic text message.
Yeah.
That is bloatware.
And the historical audit suggests that is exactly what the empire installed into the spiritual operating system of the 4th century.
To bog them down.
Yes. To keep the users from noticing that they had lost their direct connection and their autonomy, the empire overwhelmed their internal processors.
Wow.
The new state hardware, those massive basilicas, came pre-installed with heavy, undeletable peripheral programs.
We're talking about the physical environment, right?
Yeah, the physical and sensory environment.
Like the massive vaulted ceilings, the deep echoing acoustics, clouds of incense burning.
All of it.
Elaborate, choreographed processions of magistrates dressed in purple robes. It's totally overwhelming to the senses.
Completely overwhelming. In IT terms, the system forced the user to constantly process high-resolution graphics and complex, physically demanding rituals.
So the user's internal CPU is working at maximum capacity, just trying to figure out the protocol.
Exactly. When do I stand?
Right.
When do I kneel? What am I supposed to sing right now? Who has the official permission to speak?
So by bombarding their senses with all this majesty and ritual, the system intentionally saturates the host's RAM.
It is an induced state of systemic noise.
Systemic noise.
Yeah, when your RAM is entirely consumed by the spectacle, by the heavy peripheral requirements, you are left with zero cognitive bandwidth to actually read the source code.
You literally don't have the memory left to think about it.
None. You have no processing power left to verify the original data or to question the architecture of the new system itself.
You are just trying to keep your internal system from crashing under the weight of all the marble and the incense.
That's it exactly.
It's a brilliant, if terrifying, hack. I mean, you distract the user with the shiny packaging so they don't realize the actual product inside has been swapped out.
It's the perfect misdirection.
You make them feel like they are experiencing something incredibly profound because it's so visually and acoustically overwhelming.
But their actual data connection is totally throttled.
Exactly.
And once the user's RAM is fully saturated and the network has been successfully centralized into these imperial servers, the system is finally ready to execute the ultimate hack of Chapter 3.
The big one.
They completely sever the direct line.
Okay, and this brings us to the installation of what the text calls the absolution proxy.
The absolution proxy.
Now, for anyone not deep into networking, a proxy server is essentially a middleman.
Right.
It's a hub that sits between you and the internet. You send your request to the proxy sends it to the website, and then it passes the data back to you.
You never actually touch the destination.
Exactly. You are never directly connected to the end destination. You rely entirely on the middleman.
And in this historical audit, the Roman Empire positioned a human intermediary, the professional cleric, directly between the terminal, meaning the everyday user, and the creator core.
So they physically and structurally cut the wire. They made it impossible to just ping the core yourself.
They did. The text explains that the compromised system artificially generated an error 403, access denied message for the general public.
Let's focus on the word artificially there.
Yeah, that's key.
Because the original source code, the text we verified in Chapter 2, explicitly states that grace, forgiveness, and access to the creator core are entirely free and direct.
It's a core feature.
Right. The connection is wide open to any authenticated host. It's a fundamental feature of the original operating system.
But the new compromised kernel of the empire convinced the users that this was no longer true.
They gaslit the users.
Essentially, yes. They convinced the everyday host that their personal system lacked the necessary security clearance.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, you couldn't just log on. You needed a token of authorization from a human proxy, the priest, to achieve absolution or to communicate with the network administrator.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of the proxy, but here's my question.
Yeah.
How did they pull that off long term? I mean, the source code, the Bible, is an open source manual. It literally says your connection is direct and free.
It's right there in text.
So how did the empires stop users from just opening the manual, reading the code for themselves, and realizing they were being scammed by the proxy? If someone tries to sell me a bridge, eventually I'm going to check the public records.
And that is the defining tragedy of the detour. It brings us to the final, perhaps most brilliant lock on the system.
Okay, what do they do?
They changed the console language.
What do you mean?
Or, more accurately, they instituted a deliberate failure to update. The empire maintained Latin as the single official operating language of the system.
Right, but Latin was the common language of the Roman Empire initially. It wasn't the secret code at first.
At first, it was just the vernacular. It was what everyone spoke, but languages drift.
Right, they evolve.
Over the centuries, the common person on the street started speaking early forms of French, Italian, Spanish, German.
The local dialects.
Right. The everyday user completely stopped understanding Latin. Now, in a healthy IT ecosystem, when the user base changes platforms, you issue a patch.
You update the software?
You update the software to support the new language.
So you're saying the system intentionally refused to patch the language parameters?
They froze the console language entirely.
Wow.
Long after the common person stopped speaking Latin, the system rigorously enforced it as the only valid language for the source code and the rituals.
That is just... wow. So they literally encrypted the manual through calculated negligence.
Exactly.
It reminds me of those massive legacy banking systems today that still run on ancient programming languages like COBOL.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect comparison.
Only a tiny fraction of elite programmers know how to read it, which makes the entire global financial system completely dependent on those few sysadmins.
It is the exact same principle. They put the open source truth behind an impenetrable linguistic paywall.
A paywall.
Yeah. The source code was sitting right there on the altar, but to the average user, it might as well have been written in machine code.
Because they couldn't read a word of it.
Yeah, they couldn't read it to verify their own rights. They couldn't check the manual to see that the error 403 was completely artificial.
They were blind.
They became entirely dependent on the proxies to translate, interpret, and dispense the data.
So let's review this absolute masterclass in systemic control.
Let's hear it.
They took a decentralized, highly resilient, free, open source application. They bought it out and absorbed it into the state architecture.
The system envelope.
Right. Then they bloated it with heavy graphics and physical rituals to saturate the user's RAM.
The bloatware.
They installed middle management gatekeepers to sever the direct connection.
The absolution proxy.
And then they encrypted the instruction manual by refusing to update the language parameters, ensuring no one could ever read the terms of service and complain.
It is a flawless corporate takeover.
It really is flawless. They turned vibrant, autonomous nodes into completely passive terminals of a central monopoly.
The users completely forgot that they were ever supposed to be active participants in the network.
That is so wild. So what does this all mean for you? Let's bring this right into the present moment for the listener.
Yeah, let's make it practical.
I want to ask you to really audit your own operating system right now. Are there proxies in your own life today?
That's a great question.
Are you relying on an influencer, a specific institution, a guru, a political commentator, or even a self-help author as an intermediary for your own truth?
Someone else reading the code for you.
Right. Are you letting someone else hold your token of authorization rather than doing the hard, necessary work of making a direct connection yourself?
It's a critical diagnostic question because while we are analyzing a 4th century historical event today, the audit makes it very clear that this control architecture,
There's legacy system.
yeah, this legacy system of proxies and bloatware is still running in the background of our modern culture.
Oh, absolutely it is.
We are still incredibly prone to giving away our administrative privileges to anyone who puts on a purple robe or a sharp suit or who speaks with enough manufactured authority.
We just want someone else to do the heavy lifting.
Exactly. We want someone else to do the processing for us.
We really are drawn to the bloatware because it feels important, it feels heavy and official, even if it's just draining our battery and slowing down our actual progress.
It's comfortable.
It is. So let's distill the core takeaways from our deep dive into Chapter 3 today. First, we saw that the original unhackable P2P network of the early believers wasn't destroyed by the brute force of swords. It was sedated by a system envelope.
And the Empire just bought the startup.
Exactly. Furthermore, the users were subjected to a network migration. They were moved from the low-bandwidth autonomy of their own homes into centralized, highly monitored imperial servers.
And second, those state servers were loaded with massive amounts of bloatware.
Sensory overload.
Right, heavy, complex physical rituals, massive architecture, all designed specifically to saturate the human RAM, leaving the user with no processing power to question the system or seek the truth.
And finally, the system locked the users out entirely by installing an absolution proxy, artificially generating an error 403 and paywalling the original source code behind the dead language of Latin through a deliberate failure to update.
It's a bleak picture of a compromised system.
Very bleak. You look at that setup and think, well, the users are trapped forever.
Game over.
Right. But if you've ever worked in IT or frankly just observed the internet for more than 5 minutes, you know that information wants to be free.
It always finds a way.
It does. You can only keep a perfect source code locked behind a firewall for so long before someone, somewhere, finds an exploit.
Which perfectly sets up our next deep dive in this 21-part journey.
I cannot wait for this.
We've just diagnosed how the source code was locked behind a linguistic firewall in the 4th century, effectively plunging the network into the Dark Ages. The obvious question now is, how does the system recover?
Next time, we're diving into Chapter 4 of the audit, the released protocol. We're going to fast forward to the 15th century to examine the ultimate divine bypass.
The hardware upgrade.
Yes. We'll look at how a seemingly mundane piece of hardware, the Gutenberg printing press, blew the proxy system wide open.
It completely shattered the Latin encryption.
It really did. It flooded the global network with the original source code faster than the sysadmins could ever contain it.
It is a massive data explosion that no human control protocol has been able to fully restrict since. It is the beginning of the Great System Restoration.
I can't wait to unpack that one. It is going to be epic. But until then, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We spent a lot of time talking about how the 4th century empire used physical architecture, massive ceilings, chanting, and heavy rituals to saturate human RAM and block that direct connection to the creator core.
They used the immediate environment to overwhelm the processor, creating a massive buffer of systemic noise.
Exactly. So what is the modern digital matrix using right now to overwhelm your processor?
That is the question.
Look at the screen in your hand right now. Is it truly a tool for connection? Or is it just the newest, sleekest version of imperial bloatware?
Specifically designed to saturate your RAM.
With endless notifications, right? It burns your cognitive battery and keeps you permanently offline from the source code that actually matters.
Something to think about.
Definitely. Keep questioning the system, audit your own connections, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.